Oh, darling, pull up a comfy chair. Let your old grandma's journal tell you a story. Not one of those sugary sweet bedtime tales, mind you, but a true one that'll make your hair stand on end and your heart beat a little faster. It all started with a young woman named Ilara, a nurse, bless her kind soul, with eyes as bright as morning dew and a spirit as gentle as a summer breeze. She was new to the big city hospital, a place bustling with life and death, hope and despair. Ilara, with her crisp white uniform and an eagerness to help, was a beacon of light in those sterile corridors. One sweltering Tuesday, Ilara was assigned to Mr. Caldwell, a man in his late 60s, with a kindly face and a twinkle in his eye that at first seemed harmless enough. He had a procedure that day, nothing serious, just a routine checkup. As Ilara helped him with his hospital gown, oh, the indignity of those things even for a seasoned nurse, there was a little mishap. The gown slipped just a tiny bit, revealing more than either of them intended. Ilara, bless her, handled it with such grace, a quick blush, a murmured apology, and the gown was back in place before anyone else even noticed. Mr. Caldwell, though, he just chuckled a low rumble that sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. It was a fleeting moment easily dismissed as an innocent accident, or so she thought. But that, my dear, was just the first thread in a very tangled web. The next day, Mr. Caldwell specifically requested Ilara for his morning rounds. "She's got a gentle touch," he'd said to the charge nurse loud enough for Ilara to hear, and then he'd winked. A little uncomfortable, perhaps, but Ilara told herself it was just an old man being friendly. Then, as she was checking his vitals, his hand, surprisingly strong for his age, brushed against hers. Not just a fleeting touch, but a lingering one, a touch that held on for a beat too long. Ilara pulled her hand away, feigning a need to adjust her equipment. His smile, though, remained a little too knowing, a little too confident. The requests for Ilara became more frequent. "Nurse Ilara, my water's empty." Or, "Nurse Ilara, could you adjust my pillow?" Always Ilara. And with each interaction, the subtle, unsettling gestures grew bolder. A soft tap on her arm when she leaned in to listen to his chest. A prolonged gaze that felt less like admiration and more like possession. Ilara started to feel a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. She told herself she was overreacting, that he was just a lonely old man, but the feeling persisted, a cold dread that crept in whenever she saw his name on her patient list. Then came the whispered comments. "You're a very dedicated nurse, Ilara." He'd purr, his voice low, almost a conspiratorial whisper, unlike some of the others. "You actually care." Or, "A beautiful young woman like you shouldn't have to work so hard." He'd follow these compliments with a chuckle, a sound that grated on Ilara's nerves. She tried to deflect to keep her responses professional and brief, but he was like water flowing around a rock, always finding a way to seep into her personal space. One afternoon, as Ilara was charting in the nurse's station, she felt a presence behind her. It was Mr. Caldwell out of his room, leaning against the doorframe watching her. His eyes, usually twinkling, now seemed to hold a predatory glint. "Thinking about me, Ilara?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "I know you are." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced a polite smile. "Just finishing my notes, Mr. Caldwell. You should be resting." He didn't move. "I can't rest," he said, taking a step closer, "when my favorite nurse is so diligently working." He reached out slowly and brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. It was such a small gesture, yet it felt invasive, violating. Ilara flinched back, her breath catching in her throat. She started avoiding his calls, finding excuses, asking other nurses to attend to him, but Mr. Caldwell was persistent, relentless even. He'd managed to corner her in the hallway, or in the break room, his presence a dark cloud that followed her. "Running from me, Alara," he'd ask, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know you can't." Then a new player entered this unsettling game, Mrs. Caldwell, a formidable woman impeccably dressed with eyes like chips of ice that seemed to see right through Ilara. Mrs. Caldwell started showing up at the hospital more frequently, her visits coinciding suspiciously with Ilara's shifts. She would watch Ilara, her gaze cold, and assessing a silent accusation hanging in the air. One day, as Ilara was leaving Mr. Caldwell's room, Mrs. Caldwell stepped directly into her path. "Stay away from my husband," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through Ilara like a shard of glass. "I know what you nurses are like." Ilara, stunned, could only stammer a denial, but Mrs. Caldwell simply turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Ilara reeling, a fresh wave of humiliation washing over her. The situation escalated faster than a wildfire in a dry forest. Mr. Caldwell became bolder, his actions no longer just subtle touches or suggestive whispers. One evening, as Ilara was preparing to leave, he ambushed her in the dimly lit parking garage. He grabbed her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. "You think you can play games with me, Ilara?" He snarled, his voice a guttural growl that was terrifyingly unlike the mild-mannered patient she knew. "I know what you want, and you know you want it too." He pulled her closer, his face inches from hers. "You won't tell anyone, will you? A pretty little nurse like you ruining her career for a misunderstanding?" His words were laced with a venomous confidence, a chilling certainty that he had her trapped. Ilara struggled fear, a cold, paralyzing hand at her throat. She could feel his breath on her face, hot and stale, and a primal scream was building in her chest. Just as panic threatened to consume her, a voice sharp and clear cut through the oppressive silence. "Let her go, Arthur!" Ilara's head snapped up. Standing by her car, her face a mask of cold fury, was Mrs. Caldwell. Not the cold, accusatory woman Ilara had encountered before, but a woman filled with a righteous anger that was almost palpable. Mr. Caldwell, startled, released Ilara's wrist. He looked at his wife, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You've gone too far this time, Arthur?" Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. She turned her icy gaze to Ilara. "Come with me, Nurse Ilara. We need to talk." Ilara, still trembling, stumbled after Mrs. Caldwell. They went to a quiet corner of the parking lot, away from the prying eyes of the hospital. Mrs. Caldwell took a deep, shuddering breath, her anger slowly giving way to a weary sadness. "He's been doing this for years, Nurse Ilara." She confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "To countless women. Nurses, receptionists, even some of my own friends. He's a manipulator, a predator. He thrives on fear and control." Her words hit Ilara like a physical blow. The pieces of the puzzle, the unsettling touches, the knowing glances, the veiled threats all clicked into place. Mrs. Caldwell then opened her handbag and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Proof," she said, her voice filled with a bitter resolve. "Letters, emails, even some recordings. Years of his depraved behavior documented." She held them out to Ilara. "I've been collecting them, waiting for the right moment. Waiting for someone brave enough to stand with me." Mrs. Caldwell looked at Ilara. Her eyes, though still cold, now held a glimmer of desperate hope. "We can stop him, Nurse Ilara. Together. We can expose him, prevent him from harming anyone else. But it won't be easy. He's powerful, influential. He'll fight back with everything he has." The weight of her words settled heavily on Ilara's shoulders. The choice was stark, clear, and terrifying. She could walk away, pretend this nightmare never happened, bury her fear, and try to forget. Or she could pick up those papers, join forces with Mrs. Caldwell, and step into a battle that promised to be long, arduous, and potentially devastating to her own life and career. But if she didn't, how many more Ilaras would there be? How many more women would suffer under Mr. Caldwell's manipulative gaze? The thought was unbearable. Ilara looked at the stack of evidence, then at Mrs. Caldwell's determined face. A new kind of fire began to burn within her, replacing the cold dread. A fire of defiance of courage. She had always been a quiet, gentle soul, but there was a strength within her that she was only just discovering. The choice was hers, and the clock was ticking. The fight was far from over. In fact, my dear, it was just beginning. Oh, if only the story ended there, my sweet, if only the resolution came swift and easy like a summer rain. But life, as your grandma well knows, isn't always so simple. Ilara, bless her heart, took those papers. Her hand trembled as she did, but there was a spark, a tiny flicker, of something new in her eyes. It was fear, yes, but also something else, something resolute. Mrs. Caldwell gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of the pact they had just forged. It was a moment etched in the cool night air of that parking lot, a silent promise whispered between two women united by a common tormentor. The days that followed were a whirlwind, my dear, a quiet storm brewing beneath the calm surface of the hospital. Ilara, now armed with Mrs. Caldwell's meticulously collected evidence, felt a shift within her. The constant knot of dread that had resided in her stomach began to transform slowly into a steely resolve. She still felt uncomfortable around Mr. Caldwell, that was undeniable, but the fear was now laced with a simmering anger, a fierce determination to see justice done. She observed him not with the trepidation she once felt, but with a keen, analytical eye, noting every lingering glance, every subtle innuendo, every power play. It was like she was seeing him for the first time, not just a lecherous old man, but a calculated predator. Mrs. Caldwell, too, was a revelation. Away from her husband's watchful eye, she transformed from the icy, accusatory woman Ilara had first encountered into a weary, yet incredibly strong ally. They met in hushed tones during Ilara's lunch breaks in quiet coffee shops, far from the hospital, always cautious, always aware that walls had ears. Mrs. Caldwell shared stories, heartbreaking tales of women who had left the hospital, their careers damaged, their spirits broken, all because of Mr. Caldwell's manipulative web. Some had been too scared to speak up. Others had been subtly threatened, their reputations on the line. It painted a grim picture, a long history of unchecked power and silent suffering. Ilara listened, her heart aching for these anonymous victims, and with each story her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all of them. Their plan was intricate, a delicate dance around the legal and ethical minefields of the hospital system. They decided to present the evidence to the hospital administration, but not without first gathering more direct, undeniable proof. Mrs. Caldwell explained the legal complexities, the need for irrefutable evidence, and how easily a man like Mr. Caldwell, with his connections and influence, could dismiss accusations as mere fabrications or misunderstandings. He was a master of plausible deniability, a wolf in sheep's clothing. So Ilara became a silent observer, a data collector. She started keeping a meticulous log of all her interactions with Mr. Caldwell, dates, times, specific comments, unwelcome touches, and any witnesses. She subtly positioned her phone to record audio during his more egregious encounters, making sure to capture his whispered threats and suggestive remarks. It was nerve-wracking work, her heart pounding in her chest with every recorded conversation, every brush of his hand. She felt like a spy in her own workplace, constantly looking over her shoulder. But she pushed through, fueled by the stories of the women who came before her, and by Mrs. Caldwell's quiet strength. The emotional toll was immense, my dear. There were nights Ilara couldn't sleep, replaying his words, his actions, the chilling certainty in his eyes. She felt a profound sense of violation. Even when he hadn't physically harmed her, the psychological game he played was insidious, designed to make his victims doubt themselves, to feel isolated and helpless. She leaned heavily on Mrs. Caldwell during these times, finding solace in their shared understanding, their common goal. Mrs. Caldwell, in turn, found a renewed purpose in Ilara's courage. She had been collecting evidence for years, but the fear of facing her powerful husband alone had kept her from acting. Now, with Ilara by her side, a young, earnest nurse who had nothing to gain but justice. Mrs. Caldwell felt a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in decades. One particularly harrowing incident occurred when Mr. Caldwell, perhaps sensing Ilara's newfound defiance, became even more aggressive. He cornered her in the supply closet, the door barely ajar. His voice was low, menacing. "You're playing with fire, Nurse Ilara. You think I don't see it? That little spark in your eyes, it'll get you burned. And who will believe you then? A pretty little nurse against a respected man like me. They'll say you're ungrateful, a troublemaker. They'll say you asked for it." He took a step closer, his breath hot on her face. Ilara, fighting back the rising panic, kept her voice steady. "Mr. Caldwell, I need to get supplies. Please move." He chuckled a dark, unsettling sound. "Oh, you'll get what you need, Ilara, but it won't be supplies." He reached out his hand, brushing her arm, and in that moment, Ilara felt a surge of pure, unadulterated revulsion. She quickly moved past him, grabbing a handful of bandages, her hand trembling as she exited the closet. But she had kept her composure, and more importantly, her hidden audio recorder had captured every chilling word. This was the piece of evidence they needed, the undeniable proof of his predatory nature, his willingness to intimidate and threaten. Armed with this damning recording and the extensive file Mrs. Caldwell had compiled, they were finally ready. They scheduled a meeting with the hospital's chief of nursing and the head of human resources. Ilara felt a strange mix of terror and triumph as they walked into the sterile conference room. Mrs. Caldwell, though visibly nervous, held her head high, a silent testament to her years of suffering and her unwavering resolve. The meeting was tense, to say the least. Ilara, though her voice trembled, at first recounted her experiences, her initial fear giving way to a calm, factual delivery. She played the recording's each chilling word, a hammer blow against Mr. Caldwell's carefully constructed facade. Mrs. Caldwell then presented her file, a thick dossier of letters, emails, and witness testimonies spanning years. The hospital administrators, initially skeptical, grew increasingly somber as the weight of the evidence mounted. The chief of nursing, a stern woman named Ms. Davies, listened intently, her face a mask of professional concern. The HR representative, Mr. Harrison, took copious notes, his brow furrowed with each new revelation. Mr. Caldwell was called in, of course. He stormed into the room, his usual charming facade replaced by a venomous rage. He denied everything, dismissing Ilara's claims as baseless accusations and the wild fantasies of an unstable young woman looking for attention. He even tried to discredit Mrs. Caldwell, painting her as a disgruntled wife with a vendetta. He was a master manipulator, twisting words, turning facts on their head, trying to make them doubt their own sanity. He even had the audacity to try and charm Ms. Davies, appealing to their shared professional standing. But the evidence, my dear, was too strong. The audio recordings, his own voice undeniable, left no room for doubt. The legal proceedings that followed were arduous, a true test of Ilara's and Mrs. Caldwell's resilience. Mr. Caldwell, true to Mrs. Caldwell's predictions, fought back with everything he had. He hired expensive lawyers, threatened countersuits, and tried to smear their reputations. The hospital, wanting to avoid a scandal, initially tried to handle the matter quietly, offering Mr. Caldwell a quiet retirement. But Ilara and Mrs. Caldwell refused to back down. They demanded a full investigation, accountability, and safeguards to protect future nurses. They knew that if they didn't push, he would simply move on to his next victim. The story spread slowly, at first, then like wildfire through the hospital grapevine. Other nurses, emboldened by Ilara's courage, began to come forward, sharing their own unsettling experiences with Mr. Caldwell. Some were recent, others years old, but each testimony added another layer to the mountain of evidence against him. It was a wave, my dear, a growing tide of voices that had been silenced for too long. The hospital administration, facing mounting pressure and the undeniable weight of so many testimonies, had no choice but to take decisive action. The media, too, eventually got wind of the story, though Ilara and Mrs. Caldwell tried to keep it out of the public eye for as long as possible to protect the privacy of the other victims. But the truth, as your grandma always says, has a way of coming out. There were news articles, hushed whispers in the city, and the name Mr. Caldwell became synonymous with predatory behavior. It was a harsh spotlight, but it was also a powerful deterrent. In the end, after a long and draining battle, justice finally prevailed. Mr. Caldwell was stripped of his privileges, his reputation shattered, and he was forced to resign from all his influential positions. The hospital implemented new, stricter policies for reporting harassment and ensuring the safety of its staff. They also offered counseling and support to the victims, a small but significant step towards healing. Ilara, my brave, gentle Ilara, became an advocate. She continued her work as a nurse, but she also used her experience to speak out, to train other healthcare professionals on recognizing and reporting workplace harassment. She became a symbol of courage, a quiet force for change within the healthcare system. She helped establish a support group for nurses who had experienced similar situations, a safe space where they could share their stories and find strength in numbers. It was her way of ensuring that no other Ilara would suffer in silence, that no other predator like Mr. Caldwell would go unchecked. Mrs. Caldwell, too, found a new lease on life. The burden of her husband's actions, which she had carried in secret for so long, was finally lifted. She dedicated herself to supporting Ilara's advocacy work, using her influence and knowledge to help other women find their voice. Their bond, forged in shared pain and a common fight, became an unbreakable friendship. The scars, of course, remained. Ilara carried the memory of her fear of the violation she felt, but she also carried the profound knowledge of her own strength, her own resilience. She learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. She learned that even the gentlest souls can possess an incredible inner fire when faced with injustice. And she learned the invaluable lesson that speaking up, even when your voice trembles, can change not only your own life, but the lives of countless others. So, my dear, that's the true story of Ilara. Not a fairy tale, but a real-life tale of courage, resilience, and the power of two women standing together against a formidable foe. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of corners, a beacon of light can emerge, and that the quiet strength of a determined heart can truly change the world. It wasn't easy, no, not by a long shot, but it was worth every single moment of struggle, every single tear, because it meant that one less predator roamed free, and countless more women were safe. And that, my sweet, is a story worth telling again and again. It's a story that lives on a whisper of hope in the sterile corridors of every hospital, every workplace, every place where silent struggles take place. And it all began with a simple slip of a hospital gown and a determined young nurse named Ilara.